Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/audio.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You could find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting if you contact me through my email, oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. We're back today for a third time with William Hamilton, who's the president and founder of Inslaw Software, the PROMIS software that became famous, I guess, with the death of Danny Casolaro, an independent journalist, who called it the octopus because it involves so many different tentacles all over the world. And basically, there was a backdoor placed in this software. It was sold all over the world to different case management prosecutors' offices and police departments, intelligence departments around the world, and the U.S. NSA and CIA were able to get into a backdoor and collect information, see wire transfers all over the world, and ultimately use that information for blackmail and compromising even U.S. officials and people around the world, man. Just, get some blackmail dirt on these guys and control them. So we have here today exclusively William Hamilton, who is at the center of this story. This is the guy. So don't tell me to go read a book. I got the guy. I'm talking to the guy the book is about. So thank you very much. And I got the guy, William Hamilton. Mr. Hamilton, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you.
You have no idea. All week long, I'm telling people, listen, I'm going to be talking to William Hamilton. Do you have any questions for him? And I go, Ed, try and get this author on the show. I said, author, I got the guy. Okay. So here we are with William Hamilton. He has never done a radio interview before. Let's see. Let's start with this. This is what I was thinking of. Are there any books out there that you would recommend people go look to, or articles? Or are there any articles or books that you would tell people to stay away from?
Well, the maiden issue of Wired magazine had an excellent article on the Inslaw affair by a reporter named Richard Fricker, and it was one of the best ever written on the Inslaw affair. Very thorough job, and I would recommend that. And then he did another update article in a different publication later, a year or two later, and they're both excellent. And so he is no longer alive, but he was a very competent investigative reporter.
Any publications, movies, anything out there, documentaries you tell people to stay away from?
No. Okay. There have been recent articles in a publication called Covert Action Magazine that are pretty good.
Sure. On
the Inslaw affair, and I can't think of any bad article that it was written. I'm sure there's some that are much better than others, but no one has tried to discredit anything that I can think of.
Gotcha. Now, any misinformation out there that you'd like to correct? Speculation out there that you know is wrong?
No, it's a very, as you've pointed out yourself just now, unbelievably pervasive situation in the world, and the PROMIS software.
All right.
and because it was extremely adaptable and was engineered by Inslaw to be easily adaptable, because we realized unless we engineered it that way, as good as the software might have been, it wouldn't get used, because adapting it from one customer to another, it takes too much time and work. And so we developed a special subsystem to PROMIS that allowed the new user to automatically make the changes to fit his or her needs, and didn't have to go through the laborious task of testing and debugging. The subsystem would do all of that stuff, all that grunt work for him, and that's what made it so easy to adapt it, even though we did not have this in mind, to adapt it from prosecutors' offices and trial courts and appellate courts to intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies and major commercial banks throughout the world.
Is there a commercially available version of the software today that you profit from?
No.
Gotcha.
I mean, we do have still customers we support, so I should be careful how I answer that. We have governments using our software legally, and we support them.
Gotcha. Okay, let's see. What about, how does the October surprise fit into this story?
Well, the allegation was that Earl Bryan, who was a physician and venture capitalist, was instrumental in bribing people in Iran to delay the release of the 52 American hostages long enough that Reagan could defeat Jimmy Carter and in the election by depicting Carter as feckless when it comes to national security problems. And that's the allegation. And when Earl Bryan was Secretary of Health and Welfare in California, when he left that job under Reagan, he sought his fortune in Iran under the Shah. So he had a connection to Iran. And the allegations are at least plausible. They're not implausible, And Earl Bryan was a close friend of Edwin Meese, who was at one point, as you know, the Attorney General. And Bryan had a checkered career as Secretary of Health and Welfare. He got accused of wrongdoing with regards to computer-related records of the California governorship. And so the fact that he might get caught up in something like this is not entirely implausible,
Gotcha. What do you know about a company called Systematics?
It was its primary owner was Jackson Stevens, a billionaire in Arkansas. And the company became the largest bank software company in the United States. And it was located in Little Rock, Arkansas. That's kind of surprising. If it were located in New York City or Dallas or Los Angeles, that would, for an application software product for banks, that would at least look plausible. Little Rock is not a place you'd expect to find the leading bank software company in the world. And Jackson Stevens was a classmate of Jimmy Carter at the Naval Academy. And Admiral Stansfield Turner was also in the same class. He was the CIA director under Carter. And the CIA director, Stansfield Turner, And Jackson Stevens and Jimmy Carter evidently began the process of using the PROMIS software in the Carter administration, something I did not know for years, that it started that early. I thought it started under Reagan, but it started under Jimmy Carter's administration. And in fact, BCCI attempted to take over a bank in Washington that was later better known as First American Bank, but at the time it was called Financial General Bankshares. And they tried to take them over, and Financial General Bankshares sued them in federal district court in Washington for tortious interference in their business, sued BCCI and Jackson Stevens and Systematics, because the lawsuit says not only did they try to take us over, but they tried to force us to get rid of our computer software at the bank. The bank was called Financial General Bankshares, and replace it with software being marketed by Systematics in Little Rock. That's PROMIS. And it's very unusual to have a situation where you're trying to force somebody to get rid of their existing software and go to another software that they had no interest in, you know. Yeah. But that fits the Inslaw affair, and the so that is, and then the BCCI became very close to Jimmy Carter as president and provided him, for his charity work, access to a jet airplane to take him around the world.
Oh, really?
All of this is all public information, and it all makes a little bit more sense, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Oh, my goodness. My goodness. What about Vince Foster and his connection? He had a connection to, some say that he was the off-the-record attorney for Systematics. And there were some notes left behind by Casolaro that perhaps mentioned Webster Hubbell and Hillary Clinton, Vince Foster?
Oh, yeah. Well, that lawsuit I told you about, where Financial General Bankshares brought a lawsuit against Systematics and Jackson Stevens and BCCI. Yeah. The lawyers who represented Systematics in that lawsuit, the defense lawyers, were Hillary Rodham Clinton and Webster Hubbell and Vince Foster.
Really?
From the Rose Law Firm in Little Rock. That's all of them. You can find, if you look up Financial General, Google it, Financial General Bankshares lawsuit against BCCI and Jackson Stevens and Systematics. You can find a lot of what I'm telling you.
So then you're convinced, because my friends who were Hugh Turley and Mr. Knowles, who passed away recently, were skeptical about the connection between the Casolaro and his notes regarding Webster Hubbell and Vince Foster and stuff like that. But you're convinced of that?
Oh no, I think it's pretty obvious.
Okay.
And then there was a secretary to Vince Foster who I had contact with. I can't even think of her name anymore. White House secretary to Vince Foster. And she told me that Webster Hubbell sent a document about Inslaw to Webster Hubbell.
Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities.
and she was his secretary in the White House, and she knew about it. And I can't remember all the details about that anymore, but the connection was pretty well established between them on PROMIS and INSLAW.
Fascinating. So, yeah, that goes well beyond those little handwritten scratch notes left behind by Casolaro. Yeah. Who notified you of Casolaro's death? How did you find out?
One of his friends, a woman, called me and told me, and I can't even tell you the name of the person anymore, but that's what happened. It was something I did not know well, but I had contact with because of Danny Casolaro. Gotcha.
Now, and Dr. Henry Lee at one point was brought in to do like an autopsy or something, some kind of type. Well, not an autopsy wouldn't be, but some type of crime scene investigation with the.
Yeah, right.
Who brought him
in? Who did that? I assume the authorities in Martinsburg, West Virginia, because there was a lot of skepticism about whether he committed suicide,
Right.
As there should have been,
So he was brought in but not by the family, but by law enforcement brought him in.
It could have been pressure from the family, but I don't remember anymore.
Gotcha. Gotcha. What do you make? I saw some notes in Wikipedia about Danny Casolaro that he was influenced by Lyndon LaRouche, that his investigation was being fed information by Lyndon LaRouche. What do you know about that?
Not too much. I got information from LaRouche. LaRouche had, not LaRouche himself, but somebody working for him,
right,
who had good contacts with federal law enforcement people, and that's how they got a lot of their information. And they would pass some of that on to people like me, which I found helpful. And they were not indispensable or anything, but they were useful.
And you found that information to be credible?
Yes.
Verifiable?
Oh, yeah. No, they were dealing with federal law enforcement people,
gotcha,
the Justice Department, and they would get information from them, and a lot of it was valid, I think,
And Danny Casolaro was also in touch with Danny Sheehan over at the Christic Institute?
If he was, I may have known that, but I can't confirm or deny that. I just don't remember.
Gotcha. How about
it wouldn't surprise me. It would not surprise me if that's true. I just don't have any recollection anymore.
Yeah, again, I found that in Wikipedia, just perusing around different things. You sent me a document today about, I forget one of the big, let me find it, Lockheed Martin. What's that? What was that whole story about?
Well, I may have mentioned this to you, Ed. Exactly 12 months before the 50th anniversary of the U.S. Air Force, I got an email and then a follow-up telephone call from the publisher of the planned official commemorative book for the 50th anniversary of the U.S. Air Force, inviting Inslaw to take out a full-page ad in the book. And placing any ad in it was by invitation only from the publisher. And in the course of his follow-up telephone call, he said Microsoft, Oracle, and Inslaw are the three U.S. software vendors with the largest installed bases of their products in the U.S. Air Force.
Right.
And Inslaw had never even marketed to the Air Force. And the guy who was vice president of Lockheed Aircraft when they developed the F-117 stealth fighter, his name was Ben R. Rich, and somebody else co-authored a book called Skunk Works about the development of the F-117 at Lockheed Aircraft Skunk Works in Burbank, California. And in the book, he boasts how several of his engineers came to him one day with a spontaneous idea. Why don't we develop a sophisticated database software for the cockpit that'll do all kinds of intelligence-related things? which they enumerate in the book. The author enumerates them. Ben Rich enumerates them.
Sure.
And he said, in a record amount of time and not too much money, we succeeded in doing that. And, of course, this is not plausible. To develop that kind of software takes years and not months, you know. And so they're claiming that they developed it from scratch, which is not plausible, I can tell you that. And he said it, the Air Force Systems Command in Dayton, Ohio was so impressed by that cockpit database software we developed for the F-117 stealth fighter that they bought a global license to install it in the cockpit of every U.S. attack aircraft. And I did a Freedom of Information inquiry to the Air Force Systems Command in Dayton, and they said, we don't have those documents, but we think they may be at Lockheed Aircraft's Palmdale, California facility. But, of course, Lockheed Aircraft, as far as I can tell, is not subject to FOIA. They're not part of the federal government, you know. And so the Air Force Systems Command escapes having to produce this stuff by saying it's over at Lockheed Aircraft's Palmdale facility. But I can't get it. I can't get at it because I can't use FOIA against Lockheed, you know.
Yeah, it's a public company. I think you could buy some stock and then request it as a stockholder,
Right.
possibly. We'd have to take a look into that. But are you still actively looking into all this?
Well, not that much.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm not very active about that.
Yeah. Then let me ask you this then. Like, after living through this, what is your day-to-day life like right now? Do you think about this every day?
Well, not every day, but frequently. You know, particularly if something comes up that I happen to know something about. You know.
Yeah.
And that happens from time to time. And
in one of the documents you sent me, there was even speculation that Osama bin Laden might have had access to the back door and had information about the investigation into his activities.
Yes, I remember being aware of those allegations, which I think could easily be plausible, but I don't remember any details about them.
Right, and you don't remember?
It would not shock me at all.
It wouldn't me either, because when there's all kinds of information that's for sale out there if you have the money. And people don't realize it. Like even those anonymous registrations for website privacy registrations, those guys sell that. They sell that information. It's like $10,000. It's not cheap, but all that stuff's for sale, man. It's all out there. What about? Can you tell us about the affidavit of William Turner?
Well, as I think I mentioned to you, he was keeping sensitive documents Kessler was getting from some of his cooperating witnesses. He was keeping them in a safe in his home in Winchester, Virginia. And Danny called him and asked him to bring that file of documents to the parking lot of the Sheraton Hotel in Martinsburg on let's say a Friday afternoon and give them to Danny because he needed him to trade with some of the people he was meeting with on Inslaw that evening. And the documents included documents Danny got from that Alan Standorf, who was an NSA civilian employee at the Vint Hill, Virginia NSA facility. And that was the guy, I think you and I talked about this, who was in January of 91, just a few months before Casolaro was found dead. This man, Alan Standorf, was found beaten to death in the back seat floor of his own car in a parking lot at Nashville Airport. And the government maintains it was never able to solve the murder. There's no question he was murdered. And having worked at NSA for 7 years, I told you all this, that I do not find it very believable that NSA would shrug their shoulders when one of their employees was found beaten to death. It can't take a chance like that. That he could have been subject to blackmail. Who knows what the hell is going on, you know?
Right, because you said before that he had access to that main core, which was highly secretive.
Well, that stuff that Turner talks about, he doesn't use the term main core,
right?
But it's blackmail stuff, and so I think it is main core. And what I was told, I may have mentioned this to you, that I was approached by a retired Army Criminal Investigation Division guy on the Hill one day when Nancy and I were about to testify on some aspect of the Inslaw case. And he offered his help to me. And he turned out to be a gutsy character. And he introduced me to some of his sources in U.S. Army Special Forces intelligence. And they did a lot of the surveillance work when supplementary surveillance, physical surveillance was needed. Evidently, the government would use U.S. Army Special Forces intelligence people to do it. And so they knew a hell of a lot about the political blackmail operation. And
Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities.
Well, I forgot what I was about to tell you about that, but at any rate.
Yeah, I forgot too. Well, you told me this off the air too. I'm forgetting too now. My goodness. Okay. I think it involved the stuff about the Division D, perhaps. No.
Hello.
Yeah, I believe it involved a Division D. Was that where you were getting at? No.
I'm not sure.
Okay, that's it. Let's put it aside for a minute. Now, what about the information you gave me about Gordon Thomas interviewing that Mossad agent? Why don't you go over that with us?
Well, you mean Rafi Eitan?
Yes.
Well, that all fit in with everything I believed about what was going on. And Gordon Thomas was doing an authorized history of the Mossad, authorized by the Israeli government. And Rafi Eitan had been the Mossad's deputy director for, I think, 2 decades, deputy director for covert operations. So he, unsurprisingly, would be in the middle of this stuff, you know. He was a legendary spy chief in Israel, in the Mossad. And so those two sworn statements from Rafi Eitan were extremely important.
Yeah, and Rafi Eitan actually says, he says in that he wouldn't repeat it on the record, on TV, on video, or on recording because he wanted to deny it later.
Oh. Yeah, I don't remember that, but it doesn't surprise me.
Oh, no, yeah, that's in there. It's in the papers you sent me. Now, I want a real quick question, too. Now, I met you through Martin Dillon, who wrote the book about Robert Maxwell. How did you come in contact with Martin Dillon? Was he asking you about information you had about Maxwell?
No, I think I mentioned this to you. I never had much contact with him directly. I had a lot of contact with Gordon Thomas.
Okay.
And Thomas furnished his 2 affidavits to Inslaw, which were extremely helpful to Inslaw. And I was aware of Dillon, and I may have talked to him from once or twice, but I don't even remember doing that. But it would have been superfluous because Gordon Thomas was the main guy on this stuff, and I was dealing directly with him anyway,
Gotcha.
with Gordon Thomas, I mean.
How does Adnan Khashoggi fit into all this?
I don't remember anymore.
Okay. do you remember who Khashoggi is, though?
Yeah, just vaguely.
A billionaire arms dealer, some say human trafficker, sex trafficker, drug dealer, smuggler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to know more about that kind of stuff than I remember today.
I hear you. Well, you've forgotten more than most people know. So we're still ahead of the game here. Okay.
Yeah.
Then the Kazaban murders that were connected to Michael Riconoscito. Do you remember that? What was going on with that?
What did you call them? Like what?
Kazaban, which I think is a city in California.
Oh, you mean where that? There's something wrong with that name, I think.
I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. It was those two murders that were connected to Michael Riconoscito that were supposedly witnesses and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't remember. One thing I meant to tell you the other day when we talked about Riconoscito is that he went to prison, as you know, he was 1 week after he gave his affidavit to Inslaw. He was arrested by the Drug Enforcement Administration at his home in Washington State, and accused, based on circumstantial evidence, of using precursor chemicals that are used to make methamphetamine, is using them for making methamphetamine. And he explained at trial that the same chemicals that are used to make methamphetamine are also used for recovering precious metals from the earth. And I'm assuming that's true. I have no independent knowledge of whether that's true, but I'm pretty confident he would be telling the truth on that. Mm-hmm. And the government would be clueless. They were out to get him no matter what, and not realizing how stupid they were. And he in addition to all of his other technical skills, he was apparently a very serious chemist. So he understood that shit, even if they didn't. And I forgot what I was going to tell you about that, but
also too, they found no traces of methamphetamine in his lab.
Oh, it's better. But yeah, this is what I was going to tell you.
Yeah.
So he finally gets paroled. Just if you serve enough time and you haven't done anything wrong in prison, they'll parole you at a certain point. So he was paroled from federal prison. As soon as he was paroled, they arrested him.
Really?
And charged him, yeah. And then took him to Washington State in front of the same judge who had handled his case and sentenced him to all those years in federal prison. But the difference was this time, Riconoscito called the friend growing up in Washington State, who was the founder and CEO or co-CEO of Costco,
right?
And asked for help. And the guy said, "Why didn't you call me earlier?" He said, "I didn't want to involve you in this." He said, "I'm not worried about being involved in it." And so the guy, of course, had all the money in the world, is the founder of Costco, right? And contacts, and he got apparently very good, well-positioned lawyers in Washington State to represent Riconoscito. And they quickly proved in front of they brought Riconoscito before the same federal district judge who had sentenced him earlier. But this time, Riconoscito had competent legal counsel, more than just competent, well connected. And one of them was a former U.S. attorney in Washington State. And they got access to documents, classified documents, showing that Riconoscito had high U.S. government security clearance. He was no drug dealer. He had these high security clearances because he was doing highly complex consulting work for the U.S. government. That's what he claimed, and it was true, you know. And so the judge who was hearing this new evidence, the guy who had sentenced him, had supposedly tears in his eyes, and when he announced there's been a serious miscarriage of justice, and I'm releasing Mr. Riconosciuto on his own recognizance from this courthouse without any conditions whatsoever. He's not on parole. He owes nothing to the United States government. And he'll walk out of this courtroom a free man. And he called it a serious miscarriage of justice. And what he's talking about is that phony DEA arrest for drug trafficking.
Do we know how much time he did in federal prison?
A number of years, but I don't remember anymore how many years it was. I used to know that stuff, but I don't remember anymore.
Oh yeah.
But it wasn't negligible. It was a bunch, you know. And so what I told you about the judge is pretty revealing. When the guy who made the mistake, I mean, he was misled by the government, obviously, by the lawyers, assistant U.S. attorneys, who were doing a political job on Riconosciuto up in Washington State, and but he was not evidently consciously part of the misconduct. He was just deceived.
Yeah, very unusual for a judge to overturn themselves and admit that they were wrong, you know.
And he used the words "a serious miscarriage of justice," which sure sounds like it was.
Yeah. And you said before, Riconosciuto's out now, but he's not talking. He doesn't do any interviews or anything. I don't blame him.
As far as I know, but people have been, from what I've been told, been associated with him have been murdered in the past several years, and he knows too much, and so the government knows what he knows, and I'm sure they keep their eye on him, you know.
Yeah. Any other mysterious deaths or murders around this besides the ones we've already talked about?
You know, just these people who Riconosciuto has claimed were so closely associated with him and who ended up getting murdered in the past 4 or 5 years, I wouldn't even remember their names,
right.
You know. But my guess is he's telling the truth. It all makes sense to me, you know. You couldn't be part of the inside. An extremely bright former insider on the government's misconduct and not be a threat to the government's ability to continue lying, right?
Yeah, you almost wonder why there aren't more, you know, murders and to keep these, you know, to put this thing under the ground, to put the whole thing under the ground, you know.
Yeah.
Because that's the cheapest way to.
Yeah, but he's a crafty character. He's very smart, and people who know about him claim that he would have sequestered all kinds of evidence at various places, because he knows he's dealing with a corrupt government. You know.
How did the relationship with Danny Casolaro and Michael Riconosciuto come about? Who contacted who first? You know.
Well, it would have been. I assume it was Danny contacting Riconosciuto, but it's one of those things I don't even remember much detail about anymore. But I'm guessing that's the more plausible explanation.
And what do you think Riconosciuto's reaction was when he found out Danny was dead?
I don't know. I don't think I've ever known. My guess is he does not believe. I don't ever remember knowing one way or the other about this, but with regard to Riconosciuto, but he's too damn smart to accept at face value that Castellaro commits suicide.
Right.
You know.
And all the people you've dealt with in all of this, has there ever been somebody who you trusted at first, you found out later on was a big mistake?
Oh, there could be, but offhand I can't think of anybody like that. Doesn't mean there isn't someone, but I've mentioned to you a few times. This has gone on for decades.
Yeah, sure.
So it's easy to forget some of it.
And plus, trauma, you block things out when you've been traumatized like this for so many years. When you're in litigation, man, it's exhausting. Even when people around you aren't dropping like flies, when you're just in long-term litigation, it's exhausting. It takes over your life. Yeah, just that alone. Litigation against the federal government, and then all your friends around you helping you, disappearing and turning up dead. It's trauma. It's trauma.
I told you that I used to have, and probably to some extent still do, compared to most people, a very good retentive memory.
Right.
And people would note that. And one day when I was being cross-examined by the chief counsel for the government in the bankruptcy court, then I happened to go to the men's room at the same time he did, and he said to me, you're a trial lawyer's dream witness. You have the most retentive memory imaginable. And he said, you're able to come up with extraordinary detail in your memory. And I think that was true,
And people used to remark that about myself, too, that I had such a good memory. I remembered every little detail. Not so much anymore, I got to admit. Past 10 years. What are you going to do,
Right.
Now, the Bill Weld document that came out, the William Weld, where they're openly talking about, hey, we want you to go sell this illegal software and then launder the money through this Swiss bank account here.
Yeah.
Do you know where the source of that document came from?
Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities.
I used to, of course, but I don't. I can't come up with it right now.
Because I'll tell you something interesting. When it was first shown to me, it was a few years ago. It was around the time of the election when he was running for election, and that thing popped up on my radar. And then when we would go back looking for it again, it would be gone. And I could only find it now. You mentioned before, covertactionmagazine.com. They're the ones who, that's the only place, that's the easiest place to find it now. But other than my website. But, it's like one of those things that it pops up on the internet and then it's scrubbed away. Goodbye.
Yeah. Well, it was pretty ballsy for him to be involved at all and to get caught.
And also, too, it describes in the document, too, as we did last time. So he did it before. Prior incidents with this character.
Yeah, it's horrible. There was so much of that going on.
Yeah.
That kind of shit, Oh, I'm saying the wrong word to you.
Again, that's okay, man. You got to pass. Now, what about do you know if Bill Weld was ever questioned about that document? Has anybody ever said a word to him in public about that?
If they did, I have no memory, one way or the other. Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure they haven't.
Yeah.
We got about 10 minutes left. Is there something I haven't asked you in the 3 hours we've done? That you think, boy, I really want the world to know this?
There's another aspect to Lockheed Martin. I don't know if I've gone over it with you. When Boyden Gray was representing Inslaw after Elliot Richardson had passed away, Boyden had been at one point the White House consul, and he was approached by Lockheed Martin's corporate headquarters, which asked him to get me to sign a draft non-disclosure agreement drafted by Lockheed Martin's corporate headquarters so that we could have a meeting Inslaw, me, Boyd and Gray, and the lawyers for Lockheed Martin, and have a frank discussion about the Inslaw case. And Boyd and Gray advised me to sign the agreement. He reviewed it, and I signed it. And shortly after I signed it, Boyd told me Lockheed Martin's corporate headquarters had changed their mind and no longer wanted to have the meeting. And Boyden's hypothesis, I'm using that word because I don't know how he knew this, was that that Lockheed Martin got worried about either unfavorable publicity that could come out of the revelations or worse, meaning possible criminal prosecutions of Lockheed Martin people for stealing this stuff, And so they decided it was their idea to seek this non-disclosure signature, and they got it. And then they reneged. And it all makes more sense based on what I've told you about that book by Ben Rich,
right?
And the contacts, almost humorous contacts by the publisher of the official commemorative book on the 50th anniversary of the U.S. Air Force, and how Inslaw was one of the 3 U.S. software vendors with the largest installed basis of its products in the Air Force, even though we never sold anything to the Air Force. It's a spectacular screw up by these people.
Yeah, do you think let's give William Hamilton a job, a no-show job? $300,000. I don't understand. So much it just makes no. I guess there's a lot of spite and rivalry and things going on too as well. What was I going to ask you? Your experience in the NSA, right? And you were telling me about how they needed to do a black bag job to get a certain chip in there. I'm sure they've overcome that now, and every commercially sold device doesn't require a black bag visit anymore, right?
Yeah, I don't know. The technology changes. I wouldn't know one way or the other about it. But I think what I do believe is they'll do whatever is necessary. Money is not a concern. When NSA wants something, it's like when the general counsel and the 2 next in line at NSA paid several $100s each to go to the special 30th anniversary meeting in Washington, D.C. at a hotel of the Computer Law Association, and then only went to one session of the 2-day conference, was my speech. And my speech was what we are learning from the first set of affidavits we've ever been able to get from people claiming firsthand knowledge of the unlawful intelligence uses of our software. People also claiming to be formerly associated with either U.S. or Israeli intelligence agencies. And anyway, I forgot what I was going to tell you about that. But
we were saying at the end they had unlimited resources, and they just use it just to visit you there and listen to your stuff.
Well, they wanted to. The subject was extremely important to them because the cover-up was continuing, and we finally had evidence. And most of the courts didn't want to hear the evidence, and I attribute that, without proof, that the government was making what Admiral Murphy alluded to, ex parte presentations on national security to these federal courts. None of which is lawful, and it's all pretty awful.
Well, from the very start, all of this NSA, CIA, local surveillance on U.S. citizens is all unlawful.
Oh, sure.
And that's gone on.
And
even when you were working for the NSA, you were aware of them spying on American citizens?
I don't remember knowing anything about that then. I could have known it and have forgotten about it, but I was focused on the war in Vietnam. That's my job.
Right.
And that's what they had trained me to read, the Vietnamese language, and all of that makes sense. So I that's, and the war was very much in full force when I was working there in the 60s.
Let me ask a quick question because we only have a few minutes left. Have you ever talked to Edward Snowden?
No.
Would you like to?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, why not, man? Why aren't you two guys talking to each other? It seems like you have so much to share.
Yeah. And he may know some useful stuff, too.
Yeah, I can get a hold of his lawyer. I'm in contact with his lawyer.
Yeah. I'd be happy to talk to him.
Oh, yeah, record the call. Send it to me.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, my goodness. I was just thinking, but if you had, back, if you had gone, you could be living in Russia right now if you would have gone public.
Yeah, no thanks.
Yeah. I think he's got a nice apartment in Russia, along with Tara Reid and a few others. Oh, boy. And one last thing, I know we were talking yesterday about, you want to make it clear that both parties, both the Republicans and the Democrats, are equally corrupt in this whole scandal.
Right. It couldn't be clearer. And that doesn't mean that everybody's corrupt. For example, a Democrat chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Jack Brooks, who did that 3-year-long investigation, and in the report, the investigative report called the Inslaw Affair, at the end of the 3 years, he accused the Justice Department of obstructing his investigation, blocking access to witnesses and documents. That takes some balls, And he was impressive. He was trying to do what he should be doing, right? And,
we need more. Yeah.
What they all should be doing. He was doing it, and he was an impressive guy.
What happened to his career after he stood up like that?
I think they defeated him.
Yeah.
I think they defeated him running for. He had been the congressman from Galveston a Democratic congressman from Galveston for, I'm guessing, 30 years. And he lost the re-election. That's not an accident in my mind,
Just
they had to get rid of him.
Yeah, if this product is worth like $500 million back in the 90s, I can only imagine what it's worth generating today, with support and all kind of stuff. Ari Ben-Menashe, clarify for me one final time. Did you find him to be credible, trustworthy, and his information he shares on this matter accurate?
Yeah, I think he knew a lot, but anybody working for these intelligence agencies should be held to a very high standard of credibility because they're beholden to somebody else. In this case, Israeli intelligence. And Israeli intelligence in the Inslaw case was an instrumentality of U.S. intelligence. And when Rafi Eitan boasted about using Robert Maxwell to sell in excess of $500 million worth of PROMIS software to foreign governments, that's all true, and it's amazing that any of it ever comes out from the government. Somehow was not able to stop the publication of this stuff.
That's true too. Yeah, I was going to say the media really hasn't picked up on this as widely as they should. You know? Yeah, but so many things too. Iran-Contra, they don't really talk about as much as they should. Epstein Island, all over the place. Don't talk about New Mexico. What are you going to do about that? What are you going to do? Mr. William Hamilton, I can't thank you enough. 3 hours of great content for me. I can't thank you enough, my friend.
Okay, well, I'm happy to do it. Thanks very much, and good luck with it.
Yeah, anything in the future comes up, you remember something, you want to send me an email, let's keep in touch, my friend. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Bye.
Good night.
Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities. Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities.